In today's episode of The Future of the Church is the Metaverse, we're going to talk to Pastor Koko. She's the pastor of Final Fantasy XIV Online, part of our MMO Church ministry. She's a white mage, and we're going to talk to her very soon. We'll be right back.
Kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do I work hard or live at my pace? You're only young once, yeah, that's all great, but I also want a future where I'm okay.
Welcome back. What's up, everybody? What's good? Hope you're doing well in your part of the world. I want to welcome you to the VR MMO Church podcast. It's called The Future of the Church is the Metaverse, and over season 1, you'll learn why we believe that, why that's a conviction. And today's episode is about MMO Church. So you've heard of virtual reality church. You might not have heard of our MMO Church. What is that? We'll talk about that in a little bit. But first of all, I want to welcome our co-host as well as our guest. We have all the way from Spain, Coldest, all the way from the UK, Alice, and my neighbor here in Texas, Pastor Koko, is our guest. But let's just take a quick moment to say hello. What's up, Coldest? How you doing, my friend? How's things going in the world of Spain? I don't know why I said it that way, but what's up over on your part of the world?
Hello, nothing much to be honest, but I'm really happy to be able to be here today with you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, it's good to see you, man. And Alice, what's up in the UK? What's good?
The moon is up and it's nighttime. But
whoa.
It's all good. Yeah.
Yeah, you're 6 hours ahead of us, aren't you? Or maybe 7 here in Central Time.
Yeah, I think I'm 6 hours ahead of you at the moment.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Oh, because of daylight, right? Savings or... Well, welcome from the UK. And my quote-unquote neighbor here in Texas, although Texas is big. What's up, Pastor Koko? What's good?
Good. Just I'm glad to be hanging out with y'all today.
Yeah, looking forward to getting to your story, MMO Church, Final Fantasy XIV Online, all things MMO. And before we get into all of that, just a quick word from our sponsors. If you find your faith community's online presence too confusing and time-consuming to manage alone, look no further than Digivangelism. Digi helps progressive leaders of spiritual communities share hope, healing, and light online through digital ministry consulting, website building, and education. They also have a new digital ministry training hub where you can access exclusive workshops, screen share walkthroughs of various online platforms, their entire digital communications review course, and space to ask experts questions for future videos. Visit digivangelism.org for a $7 all-access trial of the training hub and see how Digi can help you better share hope, healing, and light online. And from our friends at churchblock.io, the pandemic has catapulted the church into forward-thinking ministry. 10 years ago, churches were pondering whether they should have a YouTube page. Now, almost every church on the planet is live streaming via YouTube. The church is once again at the precipice of a new technological wave called blockchain. Blockchain is the underlying technology for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all other forms of digital currency. Millennials and Gen Z are adopting blockchain tech for everyday life, from investing, buying real estate, and even receiving payments for services. According to the report by the Morning Consult, 57% of all crypto adopters are millennials and 13% are Gen Z. In light of these questions, churchblock.io was created to provide answers. ChurchBlock is a customized solution for ministry leaders seeking answers and opportunities in this paradigm shift. Email info@churchblock.io for a free consultation or visit us at churchblock.io to learn more. All right, welcome back. Thanks so much to our diamond sponsors for sponsoring season 1 of The Future of the Church is the Metaverse. And by the way, none of this podcast or our newsletter is going to be behind a paywall. That's not the vision for this, but there is a way for you to subscribe to support our work. So consider being a subscriber to support the podcast as well as the newsletter. But today's guest is Pastor Koko, and we're going to be talking about MMO Church. So if you can picture virtual reality church was starting in 2016. I think about 2018, 2019, I'm going to go look here in a second. We started a new ministry called MMO Church. So our name that we go by is VR MMO Church. We have churches in virtual reality, like AltSpace, VR Chat, Rec Room. You've probably heard of that before, but you might not have heard of our MMO Church. MMO stands for Massively Multiplayer Online. And so these are things that are not necessarily virtual reality based. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that. But before we get into that, Pastor Koko, welcome. It's so excited to have you here to talk about MMO Church, to talk about Final Fantasy 14 online and all things MMO. But I'd really like to maybe give the listeners just a little bit of a history, where you come from, maybe a little bit of your story, getting into ministry, becoming a pastor. And yes, so it's just an open-ended question. Who is Pastor Koko?
Well, I am from small town Texas, if you didn't notice by the y'all earlier. I grew up like I'm a kid from the 80s. So I grew up in a very like small town legalistic church culture that took a long time to get out of. As far as like becoming a pastor, I never ever imagined that as something that I would do or like that was even possible for me, because female in the church and that legalistic country, like growing up culture, that women were to be silent. We weren't to speak. We could teach kids, but that's about it. We couldn't be a pastor or anything. So never imagined that. But that was not a plan.
Little heresy there. Women pastor. That's heretical. No, I'm just totally joking. That's not how we view the scriptures when it comes to women ministry at all. But so if you don't mind, let's kind of, we don't have to spend a whole lot of time, but you mentioned a legalistic upbringing. What was that religious environment like? So you're saying women weren't allowed, maybe only allowed to do children's ministry or something like that. And what did it go beyond that, or was it more than that, or was it limited to maybe how you served? What was that culture like for you in that environment and being a woman in that environment?
Well, there were a lot of things. It went beyond just being able to teach or anything. It was more about even the types of things you could do, like couldn't lead worship. I was a very strong singer at one point, but wasn't allowed to lead worship because I was a female. Could sing, but just not lead. And that like women couldn't play certain types of instruments. It's like drums are for boys. Women can't play drums. Guitars, you're pushing it. You're pushing it on a guitar. You can play an organ or a piano, but not a
organ and piano, right?
not a guitar.
Gotcha.
Then like even beyond that is like types of jobs. It's like mechanic. I wanted to help my dad work on cars, but nope, that's not a woman's job.
Wow. So this is a little bit.
It was chauvinistic. It was more than just women's place in the church. It was truly a chauvinistic, male-dominant society that I grew up in.
Wow. I was about to say, because, I see some churches that would say women can't be pastors, but then what you're describing kind of
much more
was infused in like everything. Like, wow, a lot of dictating what you could and couldn't do in so many areas, not just teaching in the church. Wow. And so why didn't that, because you're so involved in ministry, you lead the spiritual community in Final Fantasy 14 online. You're cultivating loving spiritual communities. Why wouldn't, after that experience, you just say, I'm done with Christianity? You have the whole deconstruction movement that's happening right now. And I think that can be a really good thing, by the way. But why not go down that route? You were just so turned off by experience. What was it for you that said, no, I still think there's something of value here, despite my negative, let's just call it suppressive experience?
Well, it took a very, very long time for me to get past that suppressive experience. I'm in my late 40s now, and only in the last few years have I been able to even resolve some of that. So it's been a lifetime of, and that is studying, looking at other church leaders, looking at healthier churches. It took me a while to learn what a healthy church looked like. And like studying the scripture for myself instead of taking other people's word for it, looking into the context, digging into the scripture, clicking on the hyperlinks in the text to see where it's all going, and actually digging in, and also like looking at other leaders out there, looking at what they're doing, watching, studying, and reading for myself. And
that's really powerful. Particularly that quality of thinking for yourself, coming to your own conclusions. And
but I did though want to leave, but God wouldn't let me go.
Leave the. You wanted to leave what again?
Like step away.
Like the whole Christianity thing. You wanted to, like you were done with it.
He wouldn't let me go.
He wouldn't let you go. That's beautiful, and I think that's a good example for people that have come maybe from that type of environment and that are just done with it. That there still is hope. There still is a spiritual life to be lived outside of that legalistic environment. And I know that when I look at our women leaders, our women pastors at MMO Church, and by the way, I know that this isn't trying to convince listeners or churches. We're just kind of gotten to this topic, and let's just go here for a minute. I just see how such a powerful work that our women have done as being pastors, and even we can even call you guys lead pastors. You've done such a powerful work, and you guys have done an amazing job as pastors. Think of Pastor Alina, Pastor Koko, Alice. I think that you've done an amazing work as well, and so I just there's a lot that could be said about that. But so you came out of this legalistic environment. You didn't give up Christianity completely. It's been a long journey. You said even recently you've kind of resolved some things as well. And then you started getting into ministry. You started getting involved, let's say, in IRL. How did you get involved? Let's say IRL. We can start there. And then also as it led into virtual reality church, which led to MMO Church. What was that journey like? Maybe start at the IRL side, and then how you started to discover VR, and then MMO Church, and then I can ask some questions there in a bit, but give us a little bit of that ministry journey, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that I have to think about that. Because again, it was a long journey that was like slow over time. And so you don't always notice things that are happening until like you look back and see, oh, I guess I changed.
That's true. Yep.
So, and some of this influence wasn't even from church community, because even now it's a thing. Even now it's an issue among a lot of churches, is that women, okay, and then they start compromising. Okay, they can be a pastor, but they can't be the lead pastor. Right?
Yeah.
They can be a pastor, but they can't be an elder. So we gotta, they still have to have a man over them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So even now we still have that, and still like just read the scripture in context, please. But some of it also came from work, like outside of church. Like I used to work at a company. It had some good things, had some bad things. Fortune 2 company. I grew a ton there, and that was not even like with Christian. Some of the workers had. I found out later. It's like I was actually pretty closely connected to one of my supervisors, and I didn't even know. Like in our local church area, because his church helped plant mine.
Oh wow!
I was like, I never knew until after I left.
That's wild.
But but that supervisor and some others had some really strong influence on me as an individual, like empowering. Like that culture was very empowering to women at that company, whereas a lot of other companies aren't. But that one was very empowering to women. I had women managers. I had women high leadership in there, whereas in a lot of companies, you pay attention to that. You don't see that. But that was one of the good things about that company, is they were like they found it very important to empower the women. So that helped a lot in that area, and helped with my communication skills and all that, because I was very afraid to speak up for myself. And so I had to learn how to do that, and how to get comfortable sharing my thoughts and opinions with people, which I was never comfortable doing well or effectively until I worked there. So it's like even outside of, and I didn't even want that job. It's like, I actually didn't want that job.
Well, you're like, I don't want this, but
God drug me there.
yeah, development. I
Kicking
feel
and
that.
screaming.
Kicking and
But I
screaming.
got there, but then that developed me as an individual more than I could give credit.
Yeah.
So yeah, he puts us where he wants us. We just have to.
And I wish,
that.
and I know, maybe someone listening might be like, wait, how come they're not talking about MMO Church? Well, origin stories are important. This really is, it leads up to it. It's really important. It's really valuable. And I wish that the empowering influence in your life was the church. I wish that was coming from the church, but it wasn't. It was what was getting in the way. There's a bit of a lesson to be learned from there. When was the first time you heard about virtual reality church? And what did you think about it?
So professionally, I design for VR. I'm a UX designer with over 24 years of experience designing for like all kinds of different platforms, desktop, mobile, multimedia CDs, for those that remember those, kiosks, all kinds of stuff. And so I got into VR in, 2016, 2017. And so one time along the way, I think it was during the COVID lockdowns, I was wondering, I wonder if there's a VR church. And so I Googled VR church.
Way back then.
And, there is something called VR church.
And did you think, is this weird? Because we get a lot of visitors, I think, we're just like role playing or just being silly. What was your knee jerk? Do you remember the first
wondering
thoughts behind it?
Wondering how legit it was, because I've always been a future tech oriented person. I have always, it's like we were, for a background, I've always been pushing future tech. Anywhere I've ever worked, I've been pushing future tech. And so even at church, it's like back then I was at a different church. The pastor was also forward thinking, and he had me looking at Second Life and back in the early 2000s. And so I've always been like forward thinking about how the church can minister to people and reach people. So I didn't have any issues with that. No problems there. That was just logical to me. And I was actually wondering why it wasn't logical to anyone else. Because it's so logical. But so no problems there. I was just wondering, is it legit? What are their like core beliefs? Are they Christ-centered and so forth? So that's what I was looking into. So I watched some YouTube videos, and I incognito attended some of your services, and
secret shopper.
Nice. And stuff. And then finally during COVID, I contacted you for some reason. I don't remember. It's like, I know VR design, I know UX. Is there anything I can do to help? I think that's how I started. Yeah,
I think we went up at our HQ at the time. We were in Verbella, and we chatted a bit. I think it's the first time we connected. So for you, just taking a quick step back, for you, there was no issue about a church existing in the metaverse. No,
because I was the one looking for it. I was like, I wonder if there is one.
Yeah. And do you think that's just because of your technological
I think so.
upbringing, or at least your interests, and that was digital relationships, virtual relationships. I think that's interesting, because even now at the publishing of this podcast at this time in 2022, church leaders are still struggling with things like digital community or an online church service or a Facebook group. So I think that's interesting. So you came and visited. You thought, hey, these guys aren't too crazy. This might be okay. We got connected. We started chatting. Little by little, you started getting integrated into, the ministry, particularly with our seminary that we have based on Discord. Went through that a bit. Now, through this whole time, what was any generic observations about the church, about the community, as you started to get to know us more? Was there anything that stood out to you?
It took a while to see anything that stood out to me. But there's just your friendly community didn't seem to be like judging of people or anything, like unduly, didn't seem to put off the vibes of like women being subjugated or anything like that. So yeah, it seemed to be a more inviting place. And when I started getting into the MMO stuff, the only reason, because you put out that little feeler for, hey, we're trying this new thing, and I was just gonna join and play and say, okay, I'll just help and play. I'll check it out.
And now you're the pastor.
Had zero agenda on that at all.
Yeah.
None.
And I forgot to mention not only a pastor of our community in that MMO, but also an elder of your MMO Church at large. So, so let's dive into MMO Church in a minute. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. A special thank you to our diamond sponsors from Digivangelism and churchblock.io. Digi helps progressive leaders of spiritual communities share hope, healing, and light online through digital ministry consulting, website building, and education. Churchblock.io is providing blockchain solutions for the church. Visit churchblock.io to learn more. All right, welcome back. We are with Pastor Koko from MMO Church, and we're excited to continue the story. We're going to get into MMO Church here in just a minute. But Coldest and Alice, perhaps you have a question at this point in the podcast for Pastor Koko. Any thoughts, any questions, any comments? Coldest, what's going on in your brain, buddy?
I am actually trying to understand this quite a bit because, to me, the topic of women getting involved in ministry, it is still such an alien thing. I know it's a thing, but I don't even know why it's a thing or when or how that got started.
So you're like, what? Why is it even an issue, right? And so, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's passages I think churches take from 1 Timothy about women being quiet, and so they can't be pastors. And so but that's interesting though, that you have you're like, I can't even compute. This is alien to me. Do you find Koko through conversations, people are like, kind of have that same reaction from Coldest? Like, what are you talking about?
No, most of them say, it's like, I'll get DMs from people saying that they don't believe that women are supposed to be
to this
pastors.
day, like even like right now.
Not right now, but I have since coming on. Yeah.
Since coming on. We had someone, when Pastor Alina was preaching, come up and started calling her Jezebel, like women shouldn't be preachers in Jezebel.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was like, okay. You know what I mean? So there is some attitudes about that. Alice, any questions, comments, or thoughts at this point?
Yeah, I remember the Jezebel thing. They were saying other things as well that weren't appropriate. But,
wow. Nothing quite hateful than Christian love, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a question I had was, can you give an example of a time that a woman in ministry has really impacted you that wouldn't have understood or impacted the same way as your average male counterpart?
Yeah, just growing up, there was Beth Moore. She was a local in the Houston area speaker at, of all things, First Baptist Church. And she was a strong influence when I was younger. Still, she wasn't a pastor. Let's get that clear. She was not a pastor. She was a women teacher teaching women.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Okay. But she was very strong and influential. And then like pastor's wife at that church where the pastor was like asking me to check out Second Life and things like that. And that pastor's wife was strong. And yeah, just slowly. But as far as like that, the men would not have, because here's the thing. I grew up subjugated. And I learned not to trust men. Sorry, men. It's not personal. I'm still working on it.
Yeah. Well, if you came from that type of environment.
Yeah. I'm not going to be able to, because in the back of my head, what is your motive? What are you after by even like approaching me? It's like, I'm not trusting.
Right.
And so, I'm a much better than I was, but it's still an issue. So there are things that I'm not going to be able to talk to a man about. It's not going to happen that I can with women. And like Pastor Alina has been also very strong.
Yeah, Pastor Alina.
Yeah,
she sets a great example too for us. Coldest and Alice, thanks for those questions. I think it's just important to dive into those as it relates particularly to the origin of MMO Church, Final Fantasy 14. Which, speaking of which, let's start getting into that. So we have our churches in virtual reality, and now we have our churches in MMO. So let's do a quick basic definition. MMO is massively multiplayer online, where hundreds or perhaps even thousands of players are inhabiting a particular world or experience. It can look different. There's different styles and flavors and ways to go about it. Some of the most popular MMOs would be things like World of Warcraft. If you've heard of that, that's one of the most popular MMOs. We'll talk about Final Fantasy 14 online. But what are some other MMOs out there that maybe you guys have played? Coldest, Alice, Koko. And then let's talk a little bit about what I consider to be an MMO, because I know that there's various definitions. Like, some of the characteristics for me about an MMO experience is one that's persistent. It continues to exist even when you close the game. So in contrast, if you go play like Fortnite, you get in there and there's 100 players, and someone might say, hey, that's massively multiplayer. But yes, for about 10 minutes. And then after that game is over, it goes away. Many games that are multiplayer based come and go, but these MMOs are persistent. They continue to exist. The sun rises, the sun sets. There's an economy, there's social systems, there's cities, there's all these different elements that are characteristic of an MMO. And I think persistence is one of the key things. It continues to exist. Economy is another one, although not necessarily has to be that. Obviously, many players, hundreds, perhaps thousands of players on a single server. What do you guys think about what would be considered an MMO, and what are some MMOs you guys have played besides, let's say, World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy 14?
I remember playing a lot of World of Warcraft back in the day. I played on the first expansion pack, the Burning Crusade, and I actually managed to rank like pretty high up in the PvP part of the game, and that was fine. But that was like, oh my goodness, that was like 15 years ago or even more. Oh my, I'm getting old, I guess. But I also tried Final Fantasy recently. And to be fair, I think it is superior than World of Warcraft, mainly because I think of the community. The community is like so warm. All of the people is like so nice. And I know some people wouldn't call Rust an MMO. I think it kind of dances over the line of what MMO can be. But I am also playing Rust, and did you know I am actually teaching on Rust?
Oh yeah. When we do we're going to do an episode with Coldest, because he's part of MMO Church, the Rusty Church. We'll talk about that during his episode. But yeah, when I think of Rust, that persistence really for me makes me feel like it's an MMO. The sun rises, the sun sets, there can be an economy, players exist and live in this world. And so for me, that's why it might not have the numbers of, like, let's say, thousands on a server, but it certainly feels like lived in, if that makes sense. But yeah, I played World of Warcraft back in the day. I think I went all the way through Lynch King. I don't think I finished the Lynch King, but I have a night elf priest somewhere. He's probably in a tavern chilling, hanging out, wondering where I'm at. But yeah, those some good memories. It's still a popular game even to this day. It's been in existence for a long time. But Alice, I think you played a couple MMOs, right? And I know that we could probably consider Rec Room and some of these VR MMO-esque. I think what's the one in VR that we were playing recently?
Zenith.
Zenith, yeah.
So I mean, the most popular MMOs, I think, are quite intimidating. So I haven't played World of Warcraft. It seems got too much of it. I got through the starting levels of Final Fantasy just because it was pretty, but not into it too much. It's a lot going on and quite confusing. So,
yeah, there is. Learning curve there.
We're happy to have Sprout sessions and show you the ropes.
Yeah, but I've played some tamer ones, so probably starting when I was quite younger. Like, there's an MMO for How to Train Your Dragon called like the School of Dragons that you go around.
Really?
I've played that one, yeah,
Wow.
and got to remember the old Club Penguin. Can that count as an MMO?
Yeah, Club Penguin. Yeah,
Yeah, Club
that
Penguin.
counts.
Yeah.
I know the purists would say maybe not, but I don't know. I have a broader definition of MMOs for sure.
Mhm.
No, that's interesting. And then Pastor Koko, tell us a little bit about Final Fantasy 14 Online. Let's just before we talk about the church, tell us about that experience, that MMO. What's it like? And then we'll get into planning a church in that experience.
Yeah, it's different to me than other MMOs. I've played multiple as well. I've played Neverwinter. I never played World of Warcraft, but Final Fantasy 14 seems to be a rival because they're like the top two. And so there's millions of players in both of those, and they jump ship for each other. But the Final Fantasy to me is a pretty positive culture for the most part. You do have some people in there that can be mean and so forth, but for the most part, it's relatively positive, at least as far as what I've encountered. And that it is in the Final Fantasy genre that you have all of the different Final Fantasy games up through 16's getting ready to be released in a year or two. 14 is kind of an amalgamation of all of those games into an MMO. There was Final Fantasy 11, which was also an MMO that's popular. This one is a different take on that one. Pretty positive. You can have all kinds of different characters, and there's cat girls and boys. There's bunny boys and girls. There's these lion-looking races and elves and their version of dwarves, and there's humans too, but humans are boring. So we want all the different things than humans. And yeah, it's just a good community, and the people for stories for what goes on in the community. I have had situations where I have been talking to someone, something's going down in real life, and then complete strangers are hanging out because I was in the middle of a raid once and something was happening in IRL, and I'm like, I'm sorry, you can kick me if you want. I'm dealing with this thing, and they just hung out, and then even after we left, they still hung out and just sat there with me. In game while I was dealing with something IRL, and that is the type of community that is. It's cool, and I didn't know those people. Yeah, I didn't know them.
Such a positive community, and I think at this moment I just kind of want to throw I don't know what the word is, olive branch, or to those who are maybe still lost. I don't know what an MMO is. This is confusing, and I know this isn't the best example, but perhaps you've seen Lord of the Rings, where these dwarves and hobbits and humans, they go on an adventure, they gather up, and they go to defeat the Dark Lord. And so if you kind of take that concept and you bring it into, that's what really Final Fantasy 14 and World of Warcraft is. You pick a character, Pastor Koko was saying, whether it's an elf or a lion, human, dwarf, or whatever, and they all have their different terms. And then you pick a class. Am I going to be a warrior? Am I going to be a tank? Perhaps I'll be a healer. A tank is going to be very tough, take a lot of damage. Let's say you're fighting a dragon, and then the healer is in the back. They call them squishy, which means that they don't have the armor like a tank, but they're going to heal the tank so that the tank doesn't die. And so you come together. It's it is kind of like Lord of the Rings, where there's a fellowship of players, and you connect with other players, and you go on adventures, you go into dungeons, you do quests, you travel to different cities. There's an economy, there's armor to buy, there's potions to buy. So it's it's an amazing experience. I personally feel, and I know this is a stretch, that everyone should experience one MMO in their life just to see what it's like, whether it's whatever it is. It could be Warcraft, Final Fantasy 14 Online. Just play through it. I know players play for years, but maybe just to get that full appreciation for what an integrated community can be like. Because I would argue that MMOs do the best at cultivating community because they have to, because the systems and the mechanisms of the game are centered around grouping up. And so if we're going to group up, we need these tools in game to make it easy for you to group up, whether it's a guild, whether it's a fellowship, perhaps it's a link shell. And what's the guild again for Final Fantasy 14? I don't
Free
know.
company?
Free company, and all that stuff. So yeah, I think there is something definitely to be learned. And I think if I had we do have a seminary, but I think maybe one of the semesters, and this is a fantastic idea that I just came up with and we're totally going to do it. One of the semesters, you have to go from beginning to end to an MMO. Like that's, so you can experience virtual community, strong social tools, and really find almost like best practices to how to have a community as well, and to observe other communities around you. So, anyways,
I'm actually going through and studying different MMOs right now. I'm playing Tower Fantasy, I'm playing Guild Wars 2, and I've checked out BDO before Black Desert Online, and I'm done with the MSQ on Tower Fantasy. But Guild Wars 2 is going to be a long list. That one's been out even longer than Final Fantasy.
Yeah, Guild Wars 2, that was great. I started to get into it, didn't have time to really, finish it up. But really, when we're thinking about church and we're thinking about planting churches in these virtual communities, I think MMOs are a fantastic case study. It's complex, particularly the more advanced ones. There's probably some lighter ones. Is there an entry level MMO? Does that even exist? Because for us, we could manage World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy 14, and I think many could, but not all. Is there a MMO light, something to see? I can't think of one. That's why I'm asking if there's something comes to mind.
Well,
Maybe...
if you okay.
Sorry. Maybe Genshin Impact. Maybe, I don't know.
So if you like, because that's what I was kind of about to say, because you can do co-ops. So if you wanted to do a game that offers co-ops like Genshin Impact or Brain Went Blank, Call of Duty, those are co-ops where you can schedule a time to go play something together. That's not an MMO, but you can schedule a time to play with other players in certain events. So you can do that with Genshin Impact, but then the next step from Genshin Impact would be Tower of Fantasy, which is basically Genshin Impact as an MMO. However, the Tower of Fantasy has not designed, this is my UX professional designer coming out, they have not designed their MMO effectively. So yes, there is MMO, but it's hard to interact with the other players because of how they've set it up.
Oh, that's interesting.
So you don't have your emote systems that you have in a lot of the other MMOs, because emote system is how you can wave and clap and cheer and stuff, but you can't do that in Tower of Fantasy, at least not that I've found, and I've played through the whole thing.
That's interesting.
They haven't made it conducive, so it's not popular as an MMO.
Gotcha. Makes sense. I think there is a steep learning curve to something like Final Fantasy, but once you kind of understand it, then it kind of levels off a bit and you just kind of go on a journey. And so let's say you're imagine being in the Lord of the Rings movie and you're watching it kind of played out and they visit a church. And that's kind of what's happening in Final Fantasy 14 Online. You have this world of fantasy. You have these cities that exist. You have this persistent world where the sun rises and sets. And then as you're walking around, you might discover that there is a church over there, and it actually has a location. So Pastor Koko, tell us about the church in Final Fantasy 14 Online. What is it? Where is it? It's actually a location to visit, by the way. Some of our other experiences are more event-based. They kind of light up when the time comes on Sunday. And there is some persistence there a little bit. But for our church in Final Fantasy and Rust, they exist and it can be visited any time. So tell us a little bit about that.
We have a house we've made a free company, and the free company has a house in Shirogane, which is like their Far Eastern living quarters, housing quarters. And we've got a house. So it's basically a house church there in the community that you can actually go visit on the Siren server in the North America Ether Siren server. And yeah, we've got it set up as a Far Eastern house, and you can go in there and you can find the hidden bookshelf door to go down into through the speum into the through the wardrobe and into Narnia downstairs to visit our church. Well, that's the current decoration. You can decorate the house however you want, but that's how we have it right now.
Yeah, and it looks it's beautiful. I mean, it's fun to walk around these little cities where players have houses. You can go up to someone's house, maybe write a little note in their welcome book. If some players leave their house open, you can go tour it, check out what they're doing. And so, people could actually just, stumble on us, see our welcome book, see that, hey, there's a church here. And so that exists. The community exists. We're adventuring together. And then a couple times a month, we have these official, if you want to call it official, church services and Final Fantasy 14.
Every other Saturday.
Yeah, every other Saturday. So I'll come in, or whoever would come in as their character. They would teleport over to, what's the name of the neighborhood? Shidogane. And then they'd go to our house, walk in, go down the stairs, and that's where the church gathering is. Beautifully designed, very elaborate, ornate, very unique, very decorative. And then so we all go down there, we all grab a seat and kind of explain that live church service to us.
Yeah, it's not set up like what you would expect a church service to be. It's just a room with seats all at the same level. There's no stage that the pastor gets on and teaches and speaks at the audience for an hour or whatever. We all sit together in seating and look at each other and talk. So I try not to be the only one talking. I try to get other people to talk. I try not to do sermons. It's more like discussions, and we go through, right now we're going through Sermon on the Mount, and we're digging in deep on the Sermon on the Mount. So I don't even know how long we've been on it now, but we're on chapter 6. We just started chapter 6 last time. And there's still that chapter and chapter 7 left to go. So we're going slow and just talking about it and digging in, clicking the hyperlinks.
Yeah, and when you think of VR MMO Church, we have churches in different experiences, and they all are very different, by the way. Alt Space is different than VR Chat, which will be different when we get into a rec room. And then Rust is certainly kind of on a league of its own. And then you have Final Fantasy 14, and it's a really beautiful ambiance just to go there. If you have the music turned on just a little bit, just kind of gives it a calm setting. The visuals are very beautiful. The sense of space in that environment just kind of feels like you're engaging in something special. And then, of course, you're delivering the sermon, you're getting feedback, there's conversation, there's prayer, we take a picture. And I love that exists there. And really, I think like what the work that you're doing, Pastor Koko, is a great example for churches to really expand what church planning in this virtual age could look like, because there's unlimited possibilities. And what you're doing there, I think, is just a great example for us. So any other thoughts you have about Final Fantasy 14 and the church there?
Yeah, we try to do community. So it's not about just showing up on every other Saturday. So we have our Discord community, but we also have play sessions every week. And then we also throughout the week, like even just last night, I'm working on this and this other person in the community joined me. It's like they didn't have to, but it's just, hey, let's do this thing together. And it's just like playing together, doing life together, quote unquote, in game, playing together. And and you want to think about, you don't want to just lift and shift a service, your physical church service into another experience. You want to, and that's what we do. We explore, we see how is this game working, what's going on, what's the culture like here in this game, and let's cater to that. Let's take advantage of the strengths and weaknesses of that, or mitigate the weaknesses. Like, you're not going to be able to have a long sermon in a video game. because it's too distracting. People are going to be playing. And so you want it to be engaging for them. So that
that's one value we really discovered was as weird as it sounds, the platform tells us what it wants to be as far as how we're going to set up the church. That's really important, that we don't force a physical construct into something that's very different. So discovering that's been very empowering for us as we've planted churches in MMOs and in virtual reality. I think it's powerful. And then I think what we'd love to do, Pastor Koko, is post your video about innovation in the church, because I think that's one of your passions. Give us like a brief description of what that video is all about.
What that talks about? That talks about some statistics that came up in there are research reports that are put out every year from the American Bible Society. I think it was them that did it. State of the Church, and their most recent one can be very disheartening if you haven't checked that out. The statistics on Bible engagement have plummeted, absolutely plummeted in the last year alone. And a lot of their research, it's a very good long report. So sit down, get some coffee, and read it. But so I'm talking about that, and I'm talking about what they said, that because there's so little Bible engagement in America, this is talking about America. Jeremiah J. Johnston was talking about this in his book, Unanswered, which I have on my bookshelf back there, Unanswered, is saying that he is afraid that since there's so little Bible engagement in America right now, he is afraid that we're one generation away from a major heretical schism in the church, because people don't know what the Bible actually says. So because they're not reading it. And that video talks about that. I mean, I could go on for half an hour. I did.
We should make that its own podcast. A little bonus podcast coming at the end of season 1 with Pastor Koko, Innovation of the Church. Yeah, I think it's certainly a passion of mine. And those studies are important because they shed light on perhaps the way that we're doing things that have gotten just codified and maybe crusty, and we're just so used to it. That sheds light on that and shows, oh my goodness, you guys we have an issue here.
We're confusing traditional methods with mission.
Right, exactly. So I think that's going to be good. So that's one bonus episode podcast we should do. Another bonus episode we should do, besides Innovation in the Church with Koko, is anime, spiritual truths from animes. I think we're all anime lovers. I'd love to do that bonus episode in the future. But let's land the plane. This is time to end the podcast. Coldest and Alice, do you have a final question for Pastor Koko?
Yeah, I actually do. Koko, I am absolutely in love with what you do in Final Fantasy. And I love how you can get into the building, and it's like super, super lo-fi, chill, stupid, and study, relax too, whatever. And also how you can get the community to talk and to discuss about the themes. And so what I'm trying to get to, I guess, is what did you do, if you did anything on purpose, to get to that point?
To where the community talks with each other?
Well, I guess if you use any methods to get the people involved and to get to this super chill atmosphere.
I think people just showed up. I didn't do anything. Really. Volunteers sharing, people in the community sharing, telling other people, just spreading the word. We haven't even done any major advertising or anything for it. It's a small community. We don't have a big community in there, but that's nice as well to have a small community. It's not about numbers, it's about quality. And so we've made an impact on people's lives already. It's people in the community. Somebody from the community came to me when their child had to be put in an institution because they tried to kill themselves. And so I prayed with them, and they said they didn't have anyone else to talk to. So they came to me. It's that is awesome that I was able to be there for them. Terrible that that thing happened, but awesome that they had someone to come to. And it's like that's part of that whole community. Part of that's me. Part of that's just I don't know. It's something about Final Fantasy itself. But part of it may be because of that story so deep in there that when you're playing the game and you're paying attention to the story, it's a deep story that connects humans as human nature and the issues that we go through as humans, that brings about conversation, which brings about thoughts about how we help each other and so forth. And it's like a combination of like the game atmosphere that the creators have made, plus me just being, I'm an introvert, I'm quiet, I'm not pushy. And that somehow has a way of getting people to talk.
Okay. No,
I don't know.
beautiful answer.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Alice, you have a question for Pastor Koko?
Sure. I think even though it's something different, people are always going to compare it to these physical spaces or physical communities where you can kind of share food. If someone's hungry, you can physically drop food around. How would you, like, if someone was starving in the community, how would you help them in that way? Just because whoever's listening might not know, or how would you help people that need to
same way we did it during COVID at the local church. It's like you sent DoorDash, or you it's like we don't want to impose on people who don't want to give us their location or their real name or anything. But if we're able to, like, because we want to respect people's privacy as well, because people are sometimes cautious online, but which is good. We can still do DoorDash and other things like feed them. If that hasn't happened, that hasn't come up, but yeah, we can still. Technology is a wonderful thing that brings us all together. There's all kinds of ways to take advantage of that here to help people out.
I love that. I was on other podcast recently, and oftentimes they start at it some questions from the negative, like what are some things that you can't do that the physical church can? And my response lately has been this just not in my brain. I don't look at it through the eyes of limit or what we can't do. It's how can we do it, and to get creative. And to use our brains to come up with interesting solutions. And so that question kind of like for me falls by the wayside when I've heard that in other podcasts, because I come in at it from an unlimited perspective and that we can do it all. It might look different. It might look alternative, but it's something that we can do and we can serve. So that's a good question, Alice, because that's I think some people were maybe wondering about the limits. But really, we don't view it from a point of limit.
It's not something we think about a lot because we're in the world of, we can do this. But I hear it a lot from people who don't really involve themselves in online communities as much.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Makes sense.
You got to give it a try before you can even understand it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Pastor Koko, the White Mage. By the way, what is a White Mage before we go?
A healer?
A healer class. Nice. That's what I am too. I knew that, but I was just kind of doing the podcast host thing. And so, Pastor Koko, the White Mage, thank you so much for being with us today. Everybody, thank you for listening to The Future of the Church is the Metaverse podcast, and we'll be back next time. A special thanks to our diamond sponsors, Digivangelism and churchblock.io.
Every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray. All I need are some better days. Yeah, all I need are some better days. 'Cause all I want, and I pray, I believe in the better days.